In the morning, Mira woke to the smell of rain-washed air and warm bread. For a few quiet seconds, she did not remember where she was. There was no alarm beside her. No glowing screen. No sharp little sound pulling her out of sleep. Only the round window, pale with mist. The mountain stood beyond it, wrapped in clouds as soft as folded linen. Drops of water clung to the glass. Somewhere below, a broom moved slowly over stone. Mira dressed and went downstairs. The inn was awake, but gently. Lena was placing cups on a wooden table. The old man was cutting bread into thick slices. A child sat by the hearth, brushing a sleeping dog with great care, as if each stroke mattered. "Good morning," Lena said. "Did the night treat you kindly?" Mira thought about the question. "Yes," she said. "I think it did." Breakfast was not served quickly. It arrived piece by piece, as though the morning itself was helping. First came tea with honey, then bread with butter, then a small bowl of berries, dark and sweet, picked from somewhere high on the mountain. Mira ate slowly because everyone else did. At first, it felt strange. Her hands wanted to hurry. Her thoughts tried to run ahead and ask what came next. But nothing came next. Only breakfast. Only rain. Only the warmth of the cup against her fingers. Afterward, Lena took her outside. The village lanes shone silver. Wool blankets hung beneath porch roofs. Smoke lifted from chimneys and lazy ribbons. In the square, people passed one another with quiet greetings, never stepping too fast, never looking past the person in front of them. Mira looked up at the clock tower. The golden hands had moved again, but only a little. "How do you know when to begin the day?" she asked. Lena smiled. "When the bread is warm," she said. "When the rain has finished speaking. When our hearts are ready." Mira listened. For the first time, that answer made a kind of sense. Lena led Mira along a narrow stone path that curved behind the inn. There, beneath a green awning, several villagers sat at small wooden tables, making tea. Not drinking tea. Making it. One woman warmed the cups with hot water. One man measured dried leaves with a little silver spoon. A young boy poured from a clay kettle so slowly that the steam rose in a perfect white ribbon. Mira watched, puzzled. "In the city," she said, "tea takes 2 minutes." The boy looked up at her with bright, serious eyes. "Is 2 minutes enough time for the tea to become kind?" Mira opened her mouth, then closed it again. Lena gave her a cup. "Here, tea is not a task," she said. "It is a small visit with warmth." Mira sat beneath the awning. Rain tapped softly above her. Mist moved between the roofs. The cup in her hand smelled of mountain herbs, honey, and something floral she could not name. At first, her mind continued its old habit. What should I do after this? How will I get home? How many messages am I missing? What if everything falls apart without me? But the tea was too warm to ignore. The rain was too soft. And the villagers were not asking her to become anything. No one wanted her to be impressive. No one needed her to be useful. No one measured her by what she finished before noon. So Mira took one slow sip. The taste spread gently across her tongue, earthy and sweet. The clock tower, visible above the rooftops, gave a tender tick. A golden hand moved. Everyone noticed, but nobody cheered. They only smiled, as if a shy flower had opened. Lena looked at Mira. "The clock heard you rest," she said. Mira looked down into her cup. For the first time in a very long while, she felt tears arrive without shame. They did not fall from sadness exactly, but from the relief of not being chased. The rain kept speaking softly, and Mira listened. That afternoon, Lena gave Mira a small basket and invited her to walk to the upper garden. "There are herbs to gather," Lena said. "Only the ones that wish to come." Mira followed her up a path of wet stones, past cottages with warm windows and tiny bells hanging from their doors. The bells moved in the breeze, but their sound was so soft it seemed made for sleeping birds. The garden rested on a terrace above the village. It was not neat in the way city parks were neat. It grew in gentle layers, with rosemary, mint, lavender, and silver green leaves bending under drops of rain. Bees moved slowly between late mountain flowers. A wooden bench waited beneath an apple tree. Lena knelt beside a patch of thyme. "How do I know which ones wish to come?" Mira asked. "You touch them," Lena said. "If they release their scent, they are ready." Mira brushed her fingers over the leaves. A clean, green fragrance rose into the mist. She placed a few sprigs in the basket, careful not to take too much. Her hands, usually quick and restless, began to move with quiet attention. Pick. Breathe. Listen. Pause. Below them, the village clock stood among the rooftops. For once, Mira did not look at it. She watched a raindrop slide from the tip of a leaf and fall into the soil without sound. She watched the clouds open slightly, letting a pale line of evening light touch the mountains. Lena sat back on her heels. "You are learning our language," she said. "But I hardly speak here," Mira replied. Lena smiled. "Not every language is made of words." Mira looked at the basket in her lap, filled with herbs, rain, and the small patience of the afternoon. In the distance, the quiet bell rang once. And somewhere inside her, a knot she had carried for years loosened, just a little. By evening, the rain had become a mist so fine it seemed to float rather than fall. Mira and Lena returned from the garden with the basket between them. The herbs smelled of green hills and quiet hands. Along the way, villagers lit candles in their windows, one by one, until the whole village glowed softly beneath the mountain dark. At the inn, the old man was setting bowls on the table. "Soup tonight," he said. "The kind that forgives a long day." Mira smiled at that. She helped wash the herbs in a little wooden basin. The water was cold and clear. Lena showed her how to tear the leaves, not cut them, so their scent opened slowly. Soon the kitchen filled with warmth. There was potato, leek, thyme, and a little cream. Bread rested near the fire with a golden crust. Rain whispered against the glass. The sleeping dog sighed in its dreams. Everyone ate together at the long table. Nobody spoke much, but the silence did not feel empty. It felt full of spoons, candlelight, soft breathing, and the comfort of people who had nowhere else they needed to be. Mira thought of all the meals she had eaten standing up. All the cups of tea gone cold beside her laptop. All the sunsets she had treated like background light. She placed her spoon down and looked around the room. "What happens," she asked quietly, "if something is not finished today?" The old man tore a piece of bread and dipped it into his soup. "Then it is given a blanket," he said, "and allowed to sleep until morning." Mira laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because something in her wanted it to be true. Outside, the clock tower gave another gentle tick. This time, Mira did not feel surprised. She only pulled her shawl closer, tasted the warm soup, and let the evening finish nothing at all. Lena led Mira along a narrow stone path that curved behind the inn. There, beneath a green awning, several villagers sat at small wooden tables, making tea. Not drinking tea. Making it. One woman warmed the cups with hot water. One man measured dried leaves with a little silver spoon. A young boy poured from a clay kettle so slowly that the steam rose in a perfect white ribbon. Mira watched, puzzled. In the city, she said, tea takes 2 minutes. The boy looked up at her with bright, serious eyes. Is 2 minutes enough time for the tea to become kind? Mira opened her mouth, then closed it again. Lena gave her a cup. Here, tea is not a task, she said. It is a small visit with warmth. Mira sat beneath the awning. Rain tapped softly above her. Mist moved between the roofs. The cup in her hand smelled of mountain herbs, honey, and something floral she could not name. At first, her mind continued its old habit. What should I do after this? How will I get home? How many messages am I missing? What if everything falls apart without me? But the tea was too warm to ignore. The rain was too soft. And the villagers were not asking her to become anything. No one wanted her to be impressive. No one needed her to be useful. No one measured her by what she finished before noon. So Mira took one slow sip. The taste spread gently across her tongue, earthy and sweet. The clock tower, visible above the rooftops, gave a tender tick. A golden hand moved. Everyone noticed, but nobody cheered. They only smiled, as if a shy flower had opened. Lena looked at Mira. The clock heard you rest, she said. Mira looked down into her cup. For the first time in a very long while, she felt tears arrive without shame. They did not fall from sadness exactly, but from the relief of not being chased. The rain kept speaking softly. And Mira listened. On the last page of her notebook, Mira wrote only a few words. Not a lesson. Not a rule. Only a remembrance. Do not hurry your heart. Then she closed the notebook and placed it beside the window, where the plant stood green and quiet in the evening light. Rain moved softly over the city. It touched rooftops, umbrellas, buses, benches, and tired shoulders. It fell on people rushing home, people waiting at crossings, people looking down at their phones, and people who had forgotten, for a little while, that they were allowed to breathe. Mira stood with her tea in both hands. She no longer wished to be somewhere else. Not in the mountains. Not in the past. Not in some perfect future where everything was finished and nothing asked for her. She was here. In this room. In this life. With rain on the glass, warmth in her palms, and a quiet clock inside her chest. Far away, hidden among misty hills, the village rested beneath soft clouds. Its windows glowed. Its stone paths shone. Its bells waited kindly in the rain. And in the square, the golden clock listened, as it always had, for even one peaceful breath in the world. Somewhere, someone took that breath. Perhaps a traveler. Perhaps a child. Perhaps Mira. The clock moved. Tick. Only a little. Only enough. Mira smiled and let the evening hold her. And the village that forgot the word hurry lived on quietly, wherever someone remembered to slow down, soften their shoulders, and return gently to the life already waiting for them. The years did not take the village from Mira. They only changed the way she carried it. At first, it lived in her scarf, in her notebook, in the smell of tea and rain. Later, it lived in the way she paused before speaking. In the way she listened when someone was tired. In the way she let an evening be simple without asking it to become useful. People came and went through her life. Some stayed for years. Some only sat beside her for one cup of tea and then continued on their road. Mira learned to bless both. She learned that not every beautiful thing must be held tightly. Some things are meant to pass through us like warm light through a window, leaving the room softer than before. On rainy days, she still watched the glass. Sometimes she imagined Lena in the mountain inn, pouring tea for another traveler. Sometimes she imagined the old clock tower standing in mist, its golden hands waiting with endless patience. And sometimes, she did not imagine anything at all. She simply breathed. That was enough. One evening, when the sky was deep blue and the city lights were beginning to bloom, Mira stood by her window and heard the rain start again. Soft. Steady. Kind. She placed one hand over her heart. There was no fear there now. No frantic bell. No invisible race. Only a quiet rhythm. A life still unfolding. A woman still learning. A peaceful clock moving gently within her. Tick. Mira smiled into the rain. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, the tea was warm. The window was bright. The world was here. And so was she. That night, Mira did not dream of the village. She dreamed of the city. But in the dream, the city was softer. The traffic lights blinked gently through rain. Windows glowed like lanterns stacked high into the sky. People walked beneath umbrellas, not hurried, only moving through their own stories. Even the clocks on towers, phones, walls, and stations seemed less stern, as if they had learned to breathe between their seconds. Mira walked through it all without a map. At every corner, she found something small and kind. A cup of tea cooling on a cafe table. A scarf drying beside a doorway. A candle in an upstairs window. A child waiting patiently for a snail to cross the path. And everywhere she went, she heard the same quiet sound. Tick. Not from one clock. From many hearts. When she woke, morning was resting pale and gentle on the glass. For a while, Mira stayed beneath the blanket, listening to the world begin again. She did not reach for the day too quickly. She let it come to her. The kettle waited. The notebook waited. The city waited. And none of them were angry. Mira smiled. Perhaps that was the deepest lesson of all. Life could wait long enough for you to arrive inside it. She rose, made tea, and opened the window. Cool air entered with the smell of rain and stone. Far below, someone laughed. Somewhere nearby, a bell rang once. Mira held the warm cup in both hands and whispered, not to the village, not to the clock, but to the quiet place within herself that had finally stopped running. I am here. And for a moment, the whole morning seemed to answer. Tick. Softly. Patiently. Peacefully. On one quiet evening, Mira found an old envelope tucked inside her notebook. She did not remember placing it there. The paper was soft at the edges, and when she opened it, a faint scent rose from within. Cedar. Rain. Lavender. Wood smoke. Inside was a single blank page. Mira held it near the lamp, smiling softly. At first, she thought there were no words at all. Then the light shifted, and along the bottom of the page, written in the palest gold, one sentence appeared. You were never late to your own life. Mira sat very still. Outside, rain touched the window in patient silver lines. The city moved below, full of footsteps, headlights, voices, and windows bright with evening. But inside her room, everything became quiet enough to hear a heart remember itself. She pressed the page gently to her chest. For years, she had thought she was always behind. Behind in work, behind in love, behind in becoming the person she was supposed to be. But the village had known better. Lena had known. The old man by the fire had known. The clock tower, with its golden hands and patient silence, had known. Mira looked at the tea beside her, still warm. She looked at the plant, now full and green. She looked at the gray scarf, folded carefully over the chair. And she understood that every slow breath had been bringing her home. Not to the mountains. Not to the hidden village. To herself. She placed the golden page back inside the notebook and closed it with both hands. Then she stood by the window, watching the rain fall softly on everyone below. Some hurried. Some paused. Some were just beginning to learn. Mira smiled at them all. And deep within the gentle evening, the quiet clock ticked once more. Many years later, people would speak of the village in different ways. Some called it a dream. Some called it a place hidden between mountains. Some said it appeared only in rain, when the heart was too tired to keep pretending it was fine. But the village itself never explained. It simply waited with warm windows, stone paths, quiet bells, and tea that took as long as it needed. In the city, Mira grew older gently. She still had busy days. She still made mistakes. She still forgot, sometimes, and let the world pull her too quickly from one hour to the next. But she always came back. To the breath. To the cup. To the window. To the soft truth that life was not a race she had to win before she was allowed to rest. On rainy evenings, she would sometimes sit by the window with her gray scarf around her shoulders and smile without knowing why. Perhaps someone else had found the village. Perhaps another tired traveler had stepped into the inn, warmed their hands by the fire, and asked what time it was. Perhaps Lena had smiled and said, "Time is listening." And perhaps, above the square, the golden hands had moved again. Tick. Mira would close her eyes then, feeling the sound inside her own chest. Not urgent. Not demanding. Only present. The rain would fall. The tea would cool slowly. The city would glow beyond the glass. And Mira would understand, again and again, that the village had not taught her how to escape life. It had taught her how to enter it softly. One breath. One step. One peaceful moment at a time. The traveler stood at the edge of the village with rain on their coat and worry in their eyes. Lena opened the inn door before they could knock. "You have come a long way," she said gently. The traveler looked behind them, toward the dark path, then back at the warm room glowing with firelight. "I think I'm late," they whispered. Lena smiled, not because the words were funny, but because she had heard many hearts speak that way. "Come in," she said. "The tea is still becoming kind." The traveler stepped inside. The fire warmed their hands. The old man looked up from his blanket and nodded as if he had been expecting them. Rain tapped softly on the windows. A blue cup waited on the table, steam rising from it in slow silver curls. Outside, the clock tower listened. Far away in the city, Mira turned gently in her sleep. A quiet smile touched her face, as if some part of her had heard the door open in the mountains. The village had not ended with her. Peace never does. It moves from hand to hand, breath to breath, cup to cup. It waits in kitchens, on park benches, beside rainy windows, in the space before an answer, in the moment a tired person remembers they do not have to run from their own life. The traveler lifted the tea and took one careful sip. Their shoulders lowered. Their breath softened. And above the misty square, the golden hands of the village clock moved again. Tick. Only a little. Only enough. In the inn, the fire glowed. The rain continued. The windows shone warm against the mountain dark. And the village that forgot the word hurry kept remembering the word peace. Far away, beyond the roads Mira could see, rain was falling on the mountains. It touched pine branches, gathered on moss, and slipped quietly down the roofs of a village that did not appear on ordinary maps. In the square, the clock tower stood beneath a shawl of mist. Its golden hands rested. At the inn, Lena poured tea into a blue cup and placed it near the window, though no guest was sitting there yet. The old man by the fire mended a wool blanket, his needle moving in and out like a patient little breath. The baker set warm loaves on the sill, and the woman from the scarf shop folded gray wool beside a candle. The village waited, but not in a lonely way. It waited the way mountains wait. The way soup waits on a low flame. The way morning waits behind the dark. Somewhere, on a path above the trees, another tired traveler paused in the rain. Perhaps they had missed a bus. Perhaps their phone had gone silent. Perhaps their heart was carrying too many tomorrows. A soft bell rang once. Not loudly. Only enough to be heard by someone ready to stop. Back in the city, Mira slept peacefully beneath her blanket, rain whispering against her window. Her notebook rested beside the plant. Her gray scarf lay folded on the chair. In her dream, she was walking without needing to arrive. And in the hidden village, the clock gave one slow, golden tick. A window warmed. A kettle sang. A door opened gently to the mist. Because somewhere in the world, someone had taken one peaceful breath. When Mira finally rose from the bench, the park had become quiet around the edges. The lamps glowed softly along the path. The trees stood dark and still, holding the last drops of rain like tiny beads of glass. Beyond the gate, the city shimmered in its evening rush, but Mira no longer felt pulled apart by it. She walked home slowly. Not because she had nowhere to be, but because she was already with herself. At her apartment, she placed the empty flask in the sink, folded the cloth from the bread, and set the kettle on the stove. The familiar room welcomed her without ceremony. The plant leaned toward the window. The notebook waited beside it. The gray scarf slipped from her shoulders and rested on the chair like a quiet animal. Mira opened the notebook one last time. She did not write a lesson. She did not make a promise. She only drew a small clock with golden hands, and beneath it, she wrote the words she had once believed impossible. There is time. Then she closed the notebook. Outside, rain began again, light as a whisper. It touched the glass, the rooftops, the streets, and all the hurried people moving beneath umbrellas. It touched the city gently, as if reminding every window, every heart, every tired hand, that nothing living was meant to be rushed forever. Mira stood by the window with her tea. She thought of the hidden village in the mountains, its warm windows, stone paths, slow bells, and clocks that moved only when someone felt peaceful. Perhaps it was still there. Perhaps someone tired was finding it even now, arriving wet and lost beneath the mist. Mira smiled. And deep inside her, the quiet clock gave one final, gentle tick. Not an ending. A beginning that had learned how to breathe. That evening, Mira returned to the small park between the busy streets. The same bench was there, touched by the last warmth of the day. The trees held tiny drops of rain on their leaves. Beyond the gate, cars moved, people hurried, and the city carried on with all its bright, restless breathing. Mira sat down and poured tea from her flask. She had brought a piece of bread with honey, wrapped in a cloth. She ate it slowly, watching the sky turn from silver to blue, then from blue to a soft violet dusk. No miracle arrived. No mist opened. No hidden path appeared between the trees. And Mira was glad. Because she no longer needed the world to become magical before she treated it gently. A young man rushed past the bench, then stopped suddenly when a loose paper slipped from his folder and landed near Mira's shoe. She picked it up and handed it to him. "Thank you," he said, breathless. "I'm late." Mira smiled kindly. "Then take one breath before you go," she said. He looked confused, but he did it. One breath in. One breath out. His shoulders dropped a little. Then he nodded, almost smiling, and hurried on, but not quite as sharply as before. Mira watched him disappear through the park gate. The evening settled. A bird moved in the branches above her. A lamp flickered on beside the path. Somewhere nearby, a clock struck the hour, but softly enough that it did not break the peace. Mira held her warm cup and understood that this was how the village continued. Not by being found again, but by being passed on. One cup. One breath. One gentle pause offered to someone who had forgotten they were allowed to stop. The first star appeared above the city. Mira looked up, wrapped her scarf closer, and felt the quiet clock within her move once more. Tick. Morning came softly, with a pale line of light across Mira's blanket. She woke rested, as if the night had taken all her tangled thoughts and folded them neatly somewhere beyond reach. For a while, she stayed still and listened. There was no mountain rain. No village bell. No clock tower in the square. Only the city waking below her window, one small sound at a time. A kettle in another apartment. A bicycle rolling over wet pavement. A child laughing on the stairs. A bus sighing at the corner. Mira smiled. Once, she would have wished for silence before she allowed herself peace. Now she understood that peace could live inside sound, inside work, inside a life that was still unfinished. She rose and made tea. The steam curled upward, slow and silver in the morning light. She held the cup in both hands and stood beside the plant, whose leaves had opened wider than ever, green and bright against the glass. On the windowsill lay her folded letter to the village. Mira touched it gently. She no longer wondered whether Lena had received it. Some thanks did not need to travel by road. Some gratitude simply rose like steam, entered the air, and found its way home. Outside, people were beginning their day. Some hurried. Some paused. Some carried invisible burdens. Mira looked at them with tenderness and made a quiet wish, not loud enough for words. May you find one slow breath today. May you let one thing wait. May time be kind to you. The room warmed with sunlight. The tea cooled slowly. And deep inside her, the clock that had once belonged to a hidden mountain village kept moving, not because she had done enough, not because she had earned rest, but because she had remembered how to feel it. Tick. Softly. Gently. Peacefully. One night, long after the rain had stopped, Mira woke to a quiet room. The city outside was sleeping in pieces. A few windows still glowed. A taxi moved along the wet street. Somewhere, far away, a siren rose and faded, softened by distance until it became only another thread in the night. Mira did not feel afraid. She sat up, wrapped the gray scarf around her shoulders, and went to the window. The sky had cleared. Between the buildings, a few stars were visible, small and steady, like lanterns hung very high above the world. The plant on the sill held its leaves still. Her notebook rested beside it, closed and peaceful. Then, from somewhere she could not name, Mira heard a bell. Soft. Low. Kind. It was not loud enough to wake anyone else. It did not come from the street, or the church tower, or a passing train. It seemed to come through the night itself, traveling over mountains, mist, stone paths, warm roofs, and sleeping gardens. Mira closed her eyes. For one breath, she saw the village. Not as a dream, and not as memory exactly. As a feeling. A window glowing in rain. A cup held in both hands. A path that appears only when the heart is ready. She understood then that she would never lose it. Not completely. Even on difficult days, even when she forgot, even when life became full and noisy again, the village would wait inside the smallest peaceful moment. Mira opened her eyes. The stars remained. The city breathed. Her own heart moved gently beneath the scarf. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." No answer came. Only a soft tick within her, warm and golden as candlelight. Then Mira returned to bed, lay beneath the blanket, and let the night hold everything she did not need to carry until morning. The days became weeks, and Mira kept her promise in small, human ways. Some mornings were calm. Some mornings were not. Sometimes she drank her tea slowly. Sometimes she forgot and left it cooling beside her notebook. Sometimes she breathed before answering. Sometimes she answered from fear and only noticed afterward. But noticing was no longer a reason to punish herself. It was a doorway back. Each time she remembered, she returned gently. One evening, after rain had washed the windows clean, Mira opened her notebook and read all the lines she had written since the village. One thing at a time. One breath before the next. Do not answer from fear. Let the unfinished things sleep. I am allowed to arrive slowly. She ran her fingers over the page. The words no longer felt like lessons. They felt like home. Outside, the city glowed beneath a soft blue night. Windows lit up one by one. Somewhere, someone hurried across a crosswalk. Somewhere, someone stopped to look at the moon. Somewhere, a kettle began to sing in a kitchen Mira would never see. And she understood that the world would always contain both. The rush and the rest. The noise and the quiet. The long road and the warm window at the end of it. Mira closed the notebook and placed it beside the plant, whose new leaves were now open and green. Then she wrapped the gray scarf around her shoulders, made one last cup of tea, and stood by the window. She did not wish the city away. She did not wish herself away. She simply stood there, alive inside the evening, listening to rain begin again. Soft rain. Patient rain. Rain that never hurried to reach the ground, and yet always arrived. And deep within Mira, where worry had once kept ringing, there was now a gentler sound. Tick. A quiet clock. A peaceful heart. A life learning to move only when it was ready. That day, Mira went through the city with quiet eyes. She did not move slowly to prove anything. She did not refuse the world or turn away from its needs. She simply stopped giving every moment her panic before it had asked for it. At work, she answered what mattered. At lunch, she tasted her food. In the afternoon, when rain began to darken the windows, she stood for one breath and watched it fall. A coworker passed her desk with a stack of papers pressed to her chest. "I don't know how you stay calm," the woman said. Mira looked at the rain, then back at her. "I don't always," she said gently. "I just come back sooner now." The woman paused, as if the words had given her a small place to rest. That evening, Mira walked home beneath a sky the color of warm ash. The streets were full, but she no longer felt swallowed by them. A bicycle bell rang. A train passed in the distance. Someone's window glowed with the golden comfort of dinner being made. At her door, Mira stopped before going inside. She looked back at the city. For years, she had believed peace was something she would earn later, after finishing everything, answering everyone, becoming someone better, stronger, more prepared. Now she knew better. Peace was not waiting at the end of all her work. Peace was the small lamp she could carry while working. She entered her apartment and placed the kettle on the stove. Outside, rain touched the glass. Inside, the little plant leaned toward the light. Mira sat by the window with her tea, her notebook open, her breath unhurried. And as night slowly folded itself around the city, she wrote one final line beneath all the others. "I am allowed to arrive slowly." The room grew still. The clock within her gave one soft tick. Mira rose quietly and opened the window. Morning air entered the room, cool and ordinary. Somewhere below, a bus sighed at the curb. A shopkeeper lifted a metal shutter. A dog barked once, then settled. The city was waking in its usual way, not gentle like the village, but alive. Mira made tea. She warmed the cup first, just as she had learned. She watched the steam turn in the pale light. She waited until the leaves had opened fully, not because anyone told her to, but because waiting had become a kindness she could give herself. On the windowsill, the folded letter lay beneath the little plant. The golden thread was gone. Mira stared at the place where it had been. Then she noticed something new. Around the plant's fresh leaf, morning light had gathered in a thin golden line. It trembled softly, bright and delicate, as if the thread had not disappeared at all, but had simply chosen another form. Mira smiled. She did not need proof anymore. She did not need to explain the village, or find it on a map, or convince anyone that clocks could listen to peace. It was enough to live differently. Enough to drink slowly. Enough to answer gently. Enough to let one quiet moment open inside another. She carried her tea to the window and watched people pass below. Some hurried. Some wandered. Some paused beneath the sky without knowing why. Mira held the warm cup in both hands and breathed with them all. In. Out. The city moved. Her heart stayed soft. And somewhere, in a hidden mountain village or in the bright center of an ordinary morning, a clock gave one peaceful tick. That night, Mira dreamed of the mountain path. In the dream, she was not lost. She walked beneath tall pines while mist moved around her ankles like soft white wool. The air smelled of rain, moss, and smoke from a fire she could not see. Somewhere ahead, a bell rang once, low and kind. When she reached the bend in the path, the village was there. Warm windows glowed through the blue evening. The stone roofs shone with rain. The clock tower stood in the square, its golden hands resting quietly, as if they had all the time in the world. Lena waited beside the fountain. "You came back," Mira said. Lena smiled. "No. You remembered." Mira looked around. The baker was placing bread in the window. The old man sat by the inn door with a wool blanket in his lap. The woman from the scarf shop lifted one hand in greeting. Everything was exactly as it had been. And yet Mira knew she was not meant to stay. The village did not feel like a hiding place anymore. It felt like a lantern she had carried long enough to see her own road. Lena stepped closer and touched the gray scarf around Mira's shoulders. "Do you still know our word for time?" she asked. Mira thought of tea, rain, soup, breath, unfinished things sleeping until morning, and the quiet space between one heartbeat and the next. "Yes," she whispered. Lena nodded. "Then you do not need the path." The clock tower gave one gentle tick. Mira woke in her own bed, with dawn resting pale against the window. The city was beginning again. But inside her, the village remained, warm and patient, not asking to be found. Only lived. By late afternoon, the clouds opened and a soft gold light entered the room. Mira had spent the day in small, quiet ways. She washed one cup and dried it carefully. She folded one blanket. She read 3 pages of a book without checking the time. She stood by the window and watched the city change its colors as the sun moved west. Nothing important seemed to happen. And yet the whole day felt important. Near evening, she went outside for a walk. The streets were calmer than usual. Rainwater rested in the cracks of the pavement. A little cafe had placed candles on its tables, though the sky was not fully dark. From an open bakery door came the warm smell of cinnamon and bread. Mira walked without a destination. At the corner, she passed a clock fixed above an old shop front. Its hands pointed to the hour, ordinary and steady. But as Mira stopped beneath it, something strange and gentle happened. For one breath, the city seemed to pause. A bus waited at the light. A pigeon settled its wings. A child stopped tugging at his mother's sleeve. Even the rainwater in the gutter seemed to shine without moving. Mira looked up at the clock. Tick. The sound was soft. Not metal. Not machinery. More like a heart remembering how to be calm. Mira smiled, and the world began again. The bus moved. The child laughed. The pigeon stepped along the curb. The mother took the child's hand, slower now, and together they crossed the street. Mira understood then. The village had not given her a place to escape to. It had given her a way to return. To the city. To the day. To herself. She walked home under the amber evening, carrying no urgency in her hands, only the quiet knowledge that life did not need to be chased in order to be lived. The next Sunday, Mira did something she had not done in years. She left the whole morning empty. No errands written in neat lines. No alarm. No plan folded tightly around the hours. She woke when the light reached her pillow, pale and gentle. Rain had stopped during the night, and the city looked clean beyond the window. The rooftops shone. The sky was soft gray. Somewhere, a bird sang from a place it had found between buildings. Mira made tea slowly. Then she carried it to the window and opened her notebook. The golden thread was still there, bright as a quiet secret. For a moment, she thought of writing a letter to Lena, though she did not know where such a letter could be sent. There had been no address, no road name, no mark on any map. Still, she wrote. "Thank you for teaching me that time can wait. Thank you for the tea, the rain, the soup, and the soft bells. Thank you for showing me that peace is not the opposite of life. It is the place from which life can be lived." When she finished, Mira folded the page and placed the golden thread inside it. Then she tucked the letter beneath her plant on the windowsill, where the new leaf had opened fully toward the light. A small breeze entered the room. The letter moved once. Only once. And from far away, or from very near, Mira heard a bell so soft it might have been memory. She closed her eyes. For a breath, she saw the village again. Warm windows and mist. Stone paths after rain. Lena smiling beside the clock tower. The old man mending a blanket by the fire. Then the vision faded, but the peace remained. Mira opened her eyes and smiled at the ordinary room around her. The kettle. The cup. The rain-washed glass. The waiting day. And she did not hurry to begin it. That evening, Mira returned home with the old woman's words resting quietly inside her. "Not with my feet." She understood now. Some places were not meant to be visited again and again like shops or stations. Some places appeared when the heart was too tired to keep pretending. They opened like a door in the mist, offered warmth, and then trusted you to carry the warmth onward. Mira placed her notebook on the table. The golden thread shimmered between the pages. For a long while, she simply sat beside it, listening to the evening gather around her apartment. The kettle cooled on the stove. Rain began again, soft and light. Across the street, windows turned amber one by one, each of them holding a small private world. Mira thought of the village clock. How patient it had been. How it had never scolded anyone for being late. How it waited until peace arrived, then moved only as much as peace allowed. She wondered what would happen if she lived that way. Not perfectly. Not always. But gently. She opened her notebook and wrote a few lines for herself. Do not rush the tea. Do not answer from fear. Do not carry tomorrow before morning comes. Let the unfinished things sleep. Let the heart arrive. When she finished, she tore out the page, folded it carefully, and placed it beside her bed. Then she made soup, lit a candle, and opened the window just enough to hear the rain. The city below moved on as it always did. But inside Mira's small room, time softened its voice. She ate slowly. She breathed slowly. And when night deepened, she wrapped herself in the gray scarf, lay beneath the blanket, and felt the golden thread of the village shining quietly through her ordinary life. Somewhere within her, the clock ticked once. Not to hurry her. Only to remind her she was here. The old woman finished her bread and brushed a crumb from her coat. You remind me of a place I once knew, she said. Mira turned to her. What place? The old woman looked toward the trees, where sunlight trembled through the leaves. A village in the mountains, she said. Or perhaps I dreamed it. There were quiet bells, warm windows, and a clock that did not care for ordinary time. Mira grew very still. The noise of the city softened around her, as if someone had placed a hand gently over the world. The old woman smiled without looking at her. I was young when I found it, she continued. Tired in a way I did not know how to name. I stayed one night, maybe two. When I left, I thought I would forget. But some places do not stay behind us. They walk home inside our breathing. Mira reached into her notebook and touched the page where the golden thread rested. Did you ever go back? She asked. The old woman shook her head. Not with my feet. They sat quietly while the park moved around them. A bicycle rolled past. A child laughed near the fountain. A cloud crossed the sun and made the whole afternoon softer. Mira understood then that the village had never belonged only to her. It had been finding people for years. People with tired hearts. People who had forgotten how to sit still. People who needed to learn that time could be gentle when they were gentle with themselves. The old woman stood slowly. Thank you for the bread, she said. Thank you for remembering, Mira replied. The woman walked away beneath the trees, her step small and peaceful. Mira stayed on the bench a little longer, holding her warm cup in both hands. And for the first time, the hidden village did not feel far away at all. That afternoon, Mira took her lunch to a small park between two busy streets. It was not a mountain garden. There were no stone cottages, no misty rooftops, no clock tower rising above warm windows. There was only a wooden bench, a few tired trees, a path of damp gravel, and the city moving all around it. But Mira sat anyway. She unwrapped a piece of bread, opened a small jar of honey, and poured tea from a flask. Steam lifted into the cool air. A leaf fell from a branch and landed near her shoe without hurry. People passed by. A man spoke into his phone while walking quickly. A woman pushed a stroller with one hand and held coffee in the other. Two students laughed as they ran through a puddle. Then an old woman came slowly along the path and stopped near Mira's bench. May I sit? She asked. Please, Mira said. They sat side by side, not needing conversation at first. The old woman watched the trees. Mira watched the steam rise from her cup. After a while, the old woman sighed. Everyone moves so fast now, she said. Mira smiled softly. Yes, she replied. But not every moment follows them. The old woman looked at her, then laughed in a small, quiet way. That is a good sentence, she said. I may keep it. Mira broke her bread in half and offered a piece. The old woman accepted. For a few minutes, they ate slowly together while buses passed beyond the park gates and the city hurried around their little island of calm. A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere, a clock in a nearby building struck the hour, but Mira did not count it. She only noticed the warmth in her hands, the honey on the bread, the kind stranger beside her, and the peaceful space that had opened between two ordinary minutes. And deep within that space, soft as rain on stone, came the quietest tick. The next morning, Mira opened her notebook before opening her messages. The golden thread lay between the pages, quiet and bright. She touched it gently, then wrote beneath her old sentence. One thing at a time. And under that, she added, one breath before the next. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still looked washed and tender. Sunlight rested on the windows of nearby buildings. A pigeon stepped carefully along the ledge. Far below, people moved through the morning, some fast, some slow, all carrying invisible weather inside them. Mira made tea and sat by the window. She thought of Lena, the old man by the fire, the baker, the woman with the scarves, the garden above the village, and the clock that only moved when someone became peaceful. She wondered if she would ever find the path again. Perhaps not. Perhaps the village appeared only to those who had forgotten how to arrive in their own lives. The thought did not make her sad. It made her grateful. Her phone buzzed on the table. This time, she picked it up without fear. There were messages to answer, work to do, places to be. Life had not become empty. It had not become perfect. It had simply become kinder. Mira answered what needed answering. She left what could wait. Then she wrapped the gray scarf around her shoulders and stepped toward the door. Before leaving, she looked once around her small apartment. The warm cup by the sink. The plant by the window. The notebook with the golden thread. The soft morning light. Nothing grand had changed. And yet everything had. Mira smiled, opened the door, and walked into the day without rushing to escape it. Somewhere inside her, the quiet clock moved. Tick. The next morning, Mira opened her notebook before opening her messages. The golden thread lay between the pages, quiet and bright. She touched it gently, then wrote beneath her old sentence. One thing at a time. And under that, she added, one breath before the next. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still looked washed and tender. Sunlight rested on the windows of nearby buildings. A pigeon stepped carefully along the ledge. Far below, people moved through the morning, some fast, some slow, all carrying invisible weather inside them. Mira made tea and sat by the window. She thought of Lena, the old man by the fire, the baker, the woman with the scarves, the garden above the village, and the clock that only moved when someone became peaceful. She wondered if she would ever find the path again. Perhaps not. Perhaps the village appeared only to those who had forgotten how to arrive in their own lives. The thought did not make her sad. It made her grateful. Her phone buzzed on the table. This time, she picked it up without fear. There were messages to answer, work to do, places to be. Life had not become empty. It had not become perfect. It had simply become kinder. Mira answered what needed answering. She left what could wait. Then she wrapped the gray scarf around her shoulders and stepped toward the door. Before leaving, she looked once around her small apartment. The warm cup by the sink. The plant by the window. The notebook with the golden thread. The soft morning light. Nothing grand had changed. And yet everything had. Mira smiled, opened the door, and walked into the day without rushing to escape it. Somewhere inside her, the quiet clock moved. Tick. At home, Mira left her wet shoes by the door and placed the umbrella open in the bathtub to dry. The apartment was dark, but not lonely. She turned on one small lamp, and its warm light spread softly across the room. Rain moved down the windows in silver threads. The little plant on the sill leaned toward the glass, holding its new leaf like a secret. Mira made tea. While it steeped, she took the gray scarf from her shoulders and folded it carefully over the back of a chair. Something small fell from its edge and landed on the floor. It was a thread. Not gray, as she expected, but gold. Mira picked it up between two fingers. It was fine and soft, barely longer than a blade of grass. In the lamplight, it shimmered like the hands of the clock tower. She sat very still. Then she smiled. Some gifts did not announce themselves when they arrived. Some waited until an ordinary evening, after rain and work and a walk home, to remind you they had been there all along. Mira placed the golden thread inside her notebook, between the page that said one thing at a time and a blank page waiting patiently beside it. Then she opened the window just a little. The city breathed below. Not quietly, no. But honestly. A bus sighed. A bicycle bell rang. Someone laughed under an awning. Water whispered along the street. Mira held her cup and listened until the sounds no longer felt like noise. They became a kind of imperfect music. A city trying its best. A life trying its best. A heart learning, slowly, that it did not need to race in order to arrive. She took one sip of tea. Warmth spread through her hands. And somewhere beyond the mist, or somewhere inside the room, a soft golden tick answered. That night, Mira walked home in the rain. She could have taken a taxi. She could have hurried to the train. She could have lifted her phone and filled the walk with messages, news, and noise. But the rain was gentle. So she walked. The city was not quiet like the village. It had buses, footsteps, distant horns, and bright shop windows full of things asking to be wanted. Yet beneath it all, Mira heard another rhythm. Water running along the curb. Leaves trembling under street lamps. The soft tap of her shoes on wet pavement. At a small crossing, she stopped beside a young woman who looked close to tears. The woman held a broken umbrella in one hand and a phone in the other. Her thumb moved quickly, then stopped, then moved again. Her breathing was shallow. Mira did not ask too much. She only said, gently, "The rain is not angry tonight." The woman looked at her, surprised. Mira smiled and opened her own umbrella a little wider, enough for both of them. They stood together while the light remained red. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The rain fell around them like a curtain. Cars passed in silver lines. Somewhere nearby, a bakery was closing, and the warm smell of bread drifted into the street. The young woman took one slower breath. Then another. The crossing light changed. "Thank you," she whispered. Mira nodded. "Go softly." The woman walked on, not exactly slowly, but not as if she were being chased. Mira continued toward home. Inside her coat pocket, her phone buzzed once. She let it wait. Above the rooftops, the clouds shifted, and for a brief moment, a pale moon appeared. Mira looked up at it and thought of the mountain village, hidden somewhere beyond roads and mist, with its warm windows and honest clock. And deep inside her, time moved gently again. Weeks passed, and the city slowly learned a little of Mira's quiet. Not all of it. The traffic still moved like restless water. Phones still rang. Elevators still opened and closed with impatient sighs. People still looked at clocks as if time were something that might escape through a crack in the wall. But around Mira, small things began to change. At work, her coworker started making tea in a real cup instead of drinking coffee from a paper one. Another person placed a small plant beside his computer. Someone else began saying, "I will answer after lunch," and discovered the world did not end. Mira never spoke of the hidden village. Not fully. Some things became smaller when explained too much. But when people asked why she seemed calmer, she would smile and say, "I stopped letting tomorrow wear my coat." Most laughed. A few understood. One rainy evening, Mira stayed late at the office. The windows were dark mirrors. The city lights shimmered beyond them, blurred by mist. Everyone else had gone home, leaving behind the soft hum of machines and the quiet smell of paper. Mira finished one final message. Then she closed her laptop. For a moment, she saw her reflection in the black screen. The same face. The same eyes. But softer now. Less hunted. She wrapped the gray scarf around her shoulders and walked to the window. Below, people crossed the street quickly under umbrellas. But near the corner, an old man stood still beneath a shop awning, watching the rain with both hands around a cup. Mira watched him smile at nothing in particular. And she felt it again. The village had not vanished into the mountains. It had scattered itself quietly into the world. In warm cups. In slower breaths. In unfinished things allowed to sleep. Mira turned off the office light and stepped into the hallway, carrying no more of the day than she needed. In the days that followed, Mira did not become a different person all at once. She still forgot sometimes. She still answered too quickly. She still walked too fast when the rain began. She still felt her chest tighten when too many things asked for her at the same time. But now, she noticed. And noticing was a small doorway. When the city pressed close, she would pause with her hand on the gray scarf. She would breathe in, breathe out, and remember warm windows and mist. She would remember Lena's voice, the inn, the quiet bells, and the old clock waiting for peace before it moved. One evening, after a long day, Mira came home and found herself reaching for her laptop before removing her coat. Then she stopped. She laughed softly, not with shame, but with kindness. "Not yet," she whispered. She hung her coat by the door. She placed her shoes neatly beside the wall. She watered the little plant on the windowsill and noticed one new leaf unfolding, pale green and tender. Outside, rain began again. It touched the glass with the same patient sound she had heard in the mountains. Mira made soup from what she had. Potato, onion, a little cream, and herbs from a small packet Lena had tucked into her bag without telling her. When the thyme opened in the warm pot, the whole kitchen smelled like the upper garden after rain. She ate by candlelight. No screen. No rushing. No list beside the bowl. Only soup, rain, and the soft yellow flame. When she finished, there were still emails waiting. There was still laundry. There were still things unfinished. Mira looked at them kindly. Then she remembered the old man's words. "If something is not finished today, give it a blanket." So she closed her notebook, folded a dish towel over the laundry basket, and let the evening rest. Far away, or very near, a golden clock moved gently in the dark. That day, Mira returned to work. The building was the same as before, with glass doors, bright lights, and elevators that rose too quickly. People passed through the lobby with coffee cups, ringing phones, and faces already turned toward the next thing. Mira felt the old rhythm tug at her. Walk faster. Answer sooner. Finish more. But beneath that tug, something quieter remained. She carried the gray scarf in her bag, folded carefully beside her notebook. Before stepping into the elevator, she touched it once, just lightly, as if greeting a friend. At her desk, the messages were many. Some were important. Some only pretended to be. Some had already solved themselves while she was away, like knots loosening when no one pulled at them. Mira opened her notebook and wrote one sentence at the top of the page. One thing at a time. Then she began. She answered the first message fully, not quickly. She read the words before replying. She let herself breathe before choosing her own. When someone stopped by her desk and said, "Do you have a minute?" Mira almost said yes without thinking. Instead, she looked up kindly and said, "I can give you a real minute after I finish this." The person blinked, then nodded. Nothing broke. The ceiling did not fall. The day did not punish her for being whole. By noon, Mira made tea in the office kitchen. She stood by the small counter while the kettle hummed, watching steam curl into the bright air. A coworker rushed in, searching drawers. "I'm so behind," she whispered. Mira poured hot water into her cup. Then she smiled gently and said, "Maybe sit for one sip." The coworker stared at her, tired and uncertain. Then, slowly, she leaned against the counter. Together, they watched the steam rise. And somewhere, not in the walls and not in any clock anyone could see, time gave one soft, approving tick. The next morning, Mira woke before her alarm. For one breath, her hand reached toward the phone by habit. Then it stopped. She looked instead at the pale light resting on her ceiling. The city outside was already awake. A bus sighed at the corner. Someone closed a car door. Footsteps passed below her window, quick and uneven, carrying people into the day. Mira sat up slowly. She opened the window. Cool air entered, touched with rain, stone, coffee, and the faint green scent of her little plant. It was not mountain air. It did not smell of pine or wood smoke. But it was real. It was here. And for the first time, she did not think peace had to look a certain way before she could receive it. She made tea. Not quickly. She warmed the cup first. She watched the steam rise. She let the leaves open in the water like small brown flowers. Her phone buzzed once. Then again. Mira looked at it and smiled. Soon, she whispered, remembering how strange that word had sounded in Lena's mouth. She sat by the window and drank her tea without touching the phone. Across the street, a woman hurried along with an umbrella tilted against the drizzle. A delivery bicycle passed through a puddle. A child in a yellow raincoat stopped to look at a snail on the wall, while his father waited, impatient at first, then softer. The child pointed. The father bent down. For a moment, both of them were still. Mira felt something warm move through her chest. Perhaps the hidden village had not disappeared. Perhaps it was quietly appearing everywhere, whenever someone remembered to pause. She took another sip. The tea tasted gentle, a little bitter, a little sweet. And somewhere inside the morning, time moved kindly. By the time Mira reached the city, night had already turned the streets silver. Rain shone beneath the lamps. Cars passed in soft streams of light. People moved quickly along the pavement, coats pulled close, phones glowing in their hands like tiny restless moons. For a moment, the old feeling returned. The city was loud even when it tried not to be. A message waited. Then another. A calendar reminder blinked. Somewhere in her bag, her keys pressed against a notebook full of lists. Mira stood outside the station and felt her shoulders begin to rise. Then she remembered the old woman in the scarf shop. City shoulders. The kind that carry tomorrow before today is done. Mira smiled softly and lowered them. She did not run for a taxi. She did not hurry through the crowd. She walked slowly enough to notice the rain on the pavement, the warm smell from a bakery closing for the night, the steam rising from a little paper cup in someone's hands. At her apartment, everything was waiting just as she had left it. Shoes by the door. A stack of envelopes. A mug near the sink. A plant on the windowsill, leaning toward the glass. Mira put down her bag. She turned on one small lamp instead of all the lights. Its golden circle filled the room gently, like a village window in the rain. Then she filled the kettle. While the water warmed, she did nothing else. She did not check the messages. She did not open the envelopes. She stood by the window and watched the city breathe in its own hurried way. When the tea was ready, she held the cup in both hands. The first sip was simple. Warm. Quiet. Enough. Somewhere far away, or perhaps somewhere deep within her, a clock gave one gentle tick. By afternoon, Mira reached the place where the mountain road met the wider world. A small bus stop stood beside a field of wet grass. Its wooden roof leaned slightly to one side. A faded timetable was nailed to a post, but Mira did not hurry to read it. She sat on the bench and watched clouds drift across the valley. Far below, the city waited somewhere beyond roads and stations and noise. It waited with its bright windows, crowded crossings, full inboxes, and mornings that often forgot to breathe. Mira knew she would return to it. But she also knew she would not return exactly the same. When the bus arrived, it sighed to a stop in front of her. The driver opened the door and looked down. "Going down?" he asked. Mira nodded. She climbed aboard and chose a seat by the window. As the bus moved away, the mountains slid slowly past, green and silver from rain. Pine trees leaned over the road. Small streams hurried beside the wheels, but even their hurry sounded gentle here. Her phone stirred in her pocket. For the first time in days, it found a signal. A stream of messages appeared on the screen, one after another, each carrying a little piece of the life she had left behind. Mira looked at them. Then she turned the phone face down on her lap. Not forever. Just for one breath. She looked out the window instead. The clouds opened, and a pale beam of sunlight touched the valley. It rested on the trees, the stones, the wet road, and for one soft moment, everything seemed to glow from within. Mira breathed in. Mira breathed out. Only then did she pick up her phone again. And when she answered the first message, she did not apologize for being alive slowly. She simply wrote, "I will reply properly when I am rested." Then she leaned her head against the cool glass, wrapped the gray scarf closer, and let the road carry her down gently. The bus carried Mira through the valley as evening slowly gathered at the edges of the sky. The mountains became shadows behind her, but they did not feel lost. They felt folded somewhere inside her, beside the smell of rain, the warmth of slow tea, and the sound of a clock that moved only for peace. At the next town, people climbed onto the bus with bags, coats, and tired faces. A man sat across from Mira and checked his watch again and again. A young woman typed quickly on her phone, her brow tight. A child pressed his nose to the window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. Mira saw herself in all of them. Not with judgment. Only with tenderness. She knew that people did not rush because they hated peace. They rushed because they were afraid of being late, afraid of falling behind, afraid that life would not wait for them. She looked down at her own hands. For years, she had treated herself like something that must always be improved, answered, corrected, pushed forward. Now, in the soft rocking of the bus, she made a small promise. She would not turn her whole life into a mountain village overnight. But tomorrow, she would drink one cup of tea without doing anything else. She would open one window before opening her messages. She would let one unfinished thing sleep until morning. Outside, the last sunlight rested on the wet road like honey. The bus moved on. Mira closed her eyes for just a moment, and in the quiet behind her breath, she heard it again. Tick. A gentle sound. A patient sound. Not from a tower. From somewhere much nearer. The mountain path was softer in daylight. Mira walked beneath tall pines while drops of old rain fell from the branches in quiet little taps. The bread from the bakery rested warm in her pocket. The gray scarf held the scent of cedar and the village shop, as if a small room of candlelight had come with her. Behind her, the village grew hidden again. Not suddenly. Gently. First the rooftops blurred into mist. Then the clock tower became only a golden shape. Then even the soft bell was no louder than memory. Mira stopped once and turned back. For a moment, she felt the old fear rise in her. What if she forgot? What if the city swallowed her peace? What if tomorrow became heavy again? Then she remembered Lena's words. One thing. Not the whole village. Only one thing at a time. So Mira sat on a smooth stone beside the path and took out the bread. She ate it slowly, tasting apple, butter, warm grain, and smoke from the oven. She did not check for signal. She did not count the minutes. She let the forest breathe around her. A bird called from somewhere high above. The mist moved apart, revealing a thin line of blue sky. Mira smiled to herself. Far below, perhaps in the village, perhaps only in her heart, the clock gave a gentle tick. When she stood again, the road ahead no longer looked like something she had to conquer. It was only a road. Curving. Damp. Quiet. Patient beneath her feet. and Mira walked on slowly, carrying one warm piece of peace into the waiting world. When they came down from the clock tower, the village had begun its slow morning work. A baker carried loaves to the window and set them down as if each one deserved a place in the sun. A woman swept rainwater from her doorstep, not to finish quickly, but to hear the broom whisper over stone. Near the fountain, an old man fed crumbs to sparrows and nodded to each bird like an old friend. Mira walked through the square with Lena, feeling the gray scarf warm around her neck. She noticed things she would once have missed. The small green moss between stones. The steam rising from a cup left on a windowsill. The way sunlight touched the bell tower and turned every drop of rain into a tiny lamp. At the bakery, the baker handed her a piece of warm bread with apple butter. "For the road," he said. Mira's heart tightened at the words. "The road?" she asked. Lena looked toward the mountains. "When the mist lifts, the path will show itself again." Mira held the bread in both hands. Part of her wanted to stay where clocks only moved for peace, where soup forgave the day, where people did not understand hurry. But another part of her knew the village had not hidden itself to keep her forever. It had found her only long enough to remind her how to live. They walked to the edge of the square. Beyond the last cottage, the mist was thinning. A narrow path appeared between pine trees, pale and quiet, as if it had been sleeping until she was ready. Mira looked back at the warm windows, the stone roofs, the soft bells, and the golden clock above them all. It gave one gentle tick. Not to send her away, only to bless the moment. Mira took a slow breath, sweet with bread, rain, and wood smoke. Then she stepped toward the path, carrying the village carefully inside her. At the top of the clock tower, Mira stayed by the window for a long while. The village below looked smaller from there, yet somehow more complete. Each roof held a little silver from the rain. Each chimney lifted its smoke without effort. The stone paths curved gently, never in straight lines, as if even the roads had refused to rush. Lena stood beside her in silence. Mira thought of the city again, but it seemed farther away now, not in distance, but in feeling. She thought of her desk, her calendar, the bright screen waiting to be filled. She thought of herself moving through crowded streets with her jaw tight and her heart always leaning forward. "I don't know how to go back," she said softly. Lena did not answer at once. A small bird landed on the clock tower roof. It shook rain from its wings and began to sing a few clear notes into the morning. Then Lena said, "You do not have to take the whole village with you." Mira turned to her. "Take one thing," Lena continued. "One slow cup of tea. One breath before answering. One walk without counting steps. One evening where unfinished things are allowed to rest." Mira looked down at her hands. They looked the same as before, but they felt different, as if they had remembered they were made for more than holding phones and carrying bags. Below, the bakery door opened. Warm air drifted into the square. Someone laughed. A dog stretched in a patch of sunlight. The clock gave a soft tick. Mira smiled. Not a bright smile. Not a perfect one. Only a small, honest smile, like the first light touching a mountain after rain. For the first time, going back did not feel like losing peace. It felt like learning how to carry it carefully. Morning arrived without asking anything of her. Mira woke before the village bell, not because she was worried, but because the light had entered her room so gently that her eyes wanted to open. The rain had stopped. Outside, the mountain village was wrapped in pale gold mist. Drops shone on the rooftops. The stone paths looked newly washed. From somewhere below came the smell of bread, with smoke, and apples warming in a pan. Mira dressed slowly. She folded the blanket. She placed the gray scarf around her shoulders. Then she picked up her phone, expecting to feel the old tightness return. The screen was still dark. For once, she did not press the button. Downstairs, Lena was setting a small table near the window. Today, Lena said, the sun may visit. Mira sat with her tea and watched the village wake. A man opened his bakery door and stood for a moment just breathing in the morning. A woman shook rain from a blue cloth and laughed softly when the drops caught the light. Two children carried a basket together, walking so carefully that not one apple rolled away. After breakfast, Lena took Mira to the clock tower. Its wooden door was round at the top and painted deep green. Inside, the air smelled of dust, cedar, and old brass. Sunlight entered through thin windows, falling in quiet stripes across the stairs. They climbed slowly. At the top, Mira saw the great clock from within. Its wheels and golden rings were still, but not dead. They seemed to be listening. Who made it? Mira asked. No one remembers, Lena said. But we know why it remains. Why? Lena touched one brass wheel with a careful hand. To remind us that time does not become beautiful because it is full, she said. It becomes beautiful because we are awake inside it. Mira looked out over the village, the wet roofs, the rising smoke, the mountains opening under the morning sun. Far below, a bell rang once. And this time, when the clock moved, Mira felt it move inside her too. That night, Mira did not go straight to bed. She sat by the round window in her small room, wrapped in the gray scarf, and watched the village settle into sleep. One by one, the windows dimmed. The rain became softer. The mountains disappeared into darkness, but she could still feel them there, large and calm, holding the village like cupped hands. On the bedside table, her phone remained silent. Mira picked it up. The screen flashed for a moment, then showed a tiny red battery mark. She imagined all the messages waiting somewhere beyond the mist. Questions. Requests. Reminders. Little urgent sparks asking to be held. Her thumb hovered over the button. Then she placed the phone back down. Not everything needed an answer in the dark. She opened the window just a little. Cool air entered the room, carrying the smell of rain, stone, pine, and distant firewood. Somewhere below, a quiet bell moved in the wind, but did not ring. Mira lay beneath the blanket. At first, her thoughts tried to line up like workers at a gate. Tomorrow. Home. Work. Apologies. Explanations. Plans. But the village had given her a new habit. She breathed in. She breathed out. One thought stepped back. Then another. Then another. Outside, the clock tower waited in the mist, patient and golden. Tick. The sound was so soft Mira wondered if she had dreamed it. Her eyes grew heavy. The blanket warmed her feet. The scarf rested around her shoulders like a gentle hand. And before sleep carried her away, Mira had one last quiet thought. Maybe peace was not a place you found only once. Maybe it was a path you could learn to walk, one slow step at a time. After supper, Lena invited Mira to walk once more before sleep. The village had become almost dreamlike. Mist rested on the rooftops. Lanterns glowed behind rain-speckled glass. The stone paths reflected the windows, so it seemed the stars had come down early and were sleeping under Mira's feet. They walked without speaking. At the edge of the square, a small shop was still open. Inside, an old woman sat beside shelves of folded scarves, wool socks, and handmade blankets. A candle burned near her elbow. Its flame leaned gently, then stood upright again. The old woman looked at Mira and smiled. "You have city shoulders," she said. Mira touched her coat. "City shoulders? The kind that carry tomorrow before today is done." Mira looked down. The old woman lifted a soft gray scarf from a basket and placed it around Mira's neck. It smelled faintly of cedar and clean rain. "This was woven during 3 quiet mornings," she said. "So it remembers how to be still." Mira ran her fingers over the wool. It was warm, but not heavy. "How much is it?" she asked. The old woman shook her head. "Wear it tonight. Pay me with a slower breath." So Mira did. She breathed in. The air was cool and silver, touched with wood smoke and mountain moss. She breathed out. The little candle in the shop window trembled, and the clock tower gave a soft tick. Lena smiled but said nothing. Mira looked up at the golden hands. They had moved farther now, not because the village demanded it, but because peace had quietly entered the square and sat down beside them. For the first time, Mira wondered if time was not something chasing her. Perhaps it was something that waited. Something patient. Something kind. She and Lena walked back to the inn beneath the low clouds, and the village followed them with warm windows and rain-soft bells. By evening, the rain had become a mist so fine it seemed to float rather than fall. Mira and Lena returned from the garden with the basket between them. The herbs smelled of green hills and quiet hands. Along the way, villagers lit candles in their windows, one by one, until the whole village glowed softly beneath the mountain dark. At the inn, the old man was setting bowls on the table. "Soup tonight," he said. "The kind that forgives a long day." Mira smiled at that. She helped wash the herbs in a little wooden basin. The water was cold and clear. Lena showed her how to tear the leaves, not cut them, so their scent opened slowly. Soon the kitchen filled with warmth. There was potato, leek, thyme, and a little cream. Bread rested near the fire with a golden crust. Rain whispered against the glass. The sleeping dog sighed in its dreams. Everyone ate together at the long table. Nobody spoke much, but the silence did not feel empty. It felt full of spoons, candlelight, soft breathing, and the comfort of people who had nowhere else they needed to be. Mira thought of all the meals she had eaten standing up. All the cups of tea gone cold beside her laptop. All the sunsets she had treated like background light. She placed her spoon down and looked around the room. "What happens," she asked quietly, "if something is not finished today?" The old man tore a piece of bread and dipped it into his soup. "Then it is given a blanket," he said, "and allowed to sleep until morning." Mira laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because something in her wanted it to be true. Outside, the clock tower gave another gentle tick. This time, Mira did not feel surprised. She only pulled her shawl closer, tasted the warm soup, and let the evening finish nothing at all.